It started like any other interview. But within 5 minutes, the room went cold, and millions of viewers would soon call it a masterclass in grace. "I'm crying watching this for the 4th time. Keanu just gave a masterclass in grace." These were just 2 of the millions of comments that flooded social media within hours of the clip being posted online. What exactly had triggered such an overwhelming emotional response? Have you ever witnessed a moment so tense that even laughter had no place in the room? One man crossed the line with a joke. Another didn't raise his voice. He didn't walk off. Instead, he said just one sentence. And it changed everything. Have you ever seen someone stand their ground with just a few words? Comment 1 if yes, 2 if not yet, but hope to someday. Welcome to Motivation for Success, where quiet strength, dignity, and powerful lessons rise from the most unexpected places. Today's story takes you deep inside the heart of Hollywood to a moment no one on that set will ever forget. The studio lights burned bright, casting a soft glow across Keanu's face, revealing a quiet depth in his dark, thoughtful eyes. The audience buzzed in anticipation. Jimmy Kimmel, the veteran host, was in his element, charismatic, witty, and sharp-tongued. That night, the guest was none other than Keanu Reeves, the beloved actor known for his humility, deep voice, and quiet presence. The interview started lightheartedly. Jimmy joked about Keanu's action roles, The Matrix, and even his infamous "sad sandwich" meme. The crowd laughed. Keanu smiled politely. But then the tone shifted. Jimmy leaned in, smirking. "You know, Keanu, with all that tragedy in your life, how do you even find the motivation to smile on set? Or is that just good acting?" The laughter vanished as if someone had flipped a switch. The air grew thick, as if something sacred had just been mentioned carelessly. A young woman in the front row covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. The camera panned slowly across the audience, capturing faces transforming from amusement to silence, then to visible emotion. Keanu didn't laugh. He didn't blink. He just looked at Jimmy. Long, still, steady. And then, calmly, he said, "There are things in this world too sacred to turn into punchlines. You just crossed the line, Jimmy." The air went cold. Jimmy sat back, stunned. The audience froze. There was no music. No laughter. Just silence. And that silence was louder than anything ever said on that stage. For a moment, Jimmy tried to recover. He made an awkward comment. But Keanu remained composed, his voice even, his eyes calm. "Pain doesn't make someone weak, Jimmy. It makes them human. And sometimes it makes them stronger." The audience erupted in quiet applause, not the kind that follows a punchline, but the kind that follows a truth. "And Jimmy?" He nodded slowly. He looked down. Then, for the first time in his hosting career, he said something unscripted and real. "You're right. I'm sorry." After the break, the tone changed. Jimmy spoke more softly. He asked real questions. About Keanu's foundation for cancer research. About grief. About kindness. And Keanu opened up. For the first time on live television, he shared stories of his sister's fight with leukemia, of losing loved ones, and how he found light in helping others. It was no longer a show. It was a conversation. The clip went viral. But not for drama. For dignity. Keanu's quiet strength became a global moment of reflection. Late-night hosts across networks acknowledged it. Mental health advocates applauded it. And fans around the world said the same thing: this is what grace under pressure looks like. When the show ended, no one left the studio immediately. Jimmy walked over to Keanu, placed a hand on his shoulder, and quietly said, "Thank you. I really learned something tonight." The crew members who witnessed this moment later described it as equally powerful as what had happened on camera. One producer confessed she had to step into the hallway to compose herself. In 20 years of television, she later said, "I've never seen an interaction change a room like that." Jimmy Kimmel later wrote an open letter, thanking Keanu for reminding him that not every moment is meant to be entertaining, some are meant to be honored. The letter, published in a major entertainment magazine, sparked conversations in writers' rooms across Hollywood about the ethics of comedy and the responsibility that comes with a platform. We live in a world where pain is often turned into spectacle. But in that moment, Keanu reminded all of us that there's a line. And when you defend it with dignity, you don't just protect yourself, you elevate everyone around you. 1. You just crossed the line, Jimmy. 2. There's a difference between comedy and cruelty in disguise. Comment 1 or 2, which one hit harder? Has something like this ever happened to you? Don't be shy. If you've ever seen someone cross the line and someone else respond with quiet strength, comment 1. If you've been that person yourself, comment 2. You might inspire someone today. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. The encounter between Keanu Reeves and Jimmy Kimmel represents more than just a tense television moment, it illuminates the profound impact of setting boundaries with grace. In our hyper-connected world where shock value drives engagement and pain becomes content, this interaction stands as a testament to the transformative power of dignity. Consider the weight of Keanu's response: "There are things in this world too sacred to turn into punchlines." These words carried the gravity of personal experience. Keanu Reeves is no stranger to profound loss. His daughter was stillborn in 1999, his girlfriend Jennifer Syme died in a car accident in 2001, and his sister Kim battled leukemia for nearly a decade. These aren't footnotes in a celebrity biography, they're defining chapters in a human life. When Kimmel attempted to mine this pain for entertainment, Keanu didn't meet callousness with callousness. Instead, he created a masterclass in emotional intelligence. His response wasn't merely a rebuke, it was an invitation to something more meaningful. By refusing to participate in the commodification of his suffering, he elevated the conversation from entertainment to enlightenment. The audience's reaction speaks volumes about our collective hunger for authenticity. Their applause wasn't the reflexive response to a punchline but rather an acknowledgement of truth spoken with conviction. In that moment, they weren't just viewers, they were witnesses to genuine human connection breaking through the veneer of performative television. What followed demonstrates the healing potential of vulnerability. After the commercial break, the dynamic shifted entirely. The artificial walls of host-guest performance crumbled, replaced by genuine curiosity and compassionate listening. Jimmy's questions became gateways rather than gotchas. Keanu's responses transformed from guarded to generous. For perhaps the first time, millions of viewers saw beyond Keanu's on-screen personas, beyond Neo, John Wick, or Ted Logan, to the man who had walked through fire and emerged not hardened but humanized. He spoke of his sister's battle with leukemia not as a talking point but as a journey that reshaped his understanding of suffering in service. He discussed his cancer foundation not as a celebrity obligation but as a mission born from witnessing the ravages of disease on someone he loved desperately. This pivotal moment illustrates a profound truth: authentic boundaries don't divide, they create the safety necessary for genuine connection. When Keanu refused to allow his pain to become entertainment, he didn't shut down communication, he redirected it towards something more meaningful. His boundary wasn't a wall but a door to deeper understanding. This moment, forever remembered as the weight of silence, when dignity speaks louder than words, became more than a clip, it became a cultural mirror. The viral spread wasn't driven by scandal but by recognition, millions identifying with both the violation and the vindication. In comment sections across platforms, people shared their own stories of moments when they had to stand firm against those who would trivialize their trauma. Mental health advocates seized upon this exchange as a powerful teaching moment. In a media landscape where trauma is often exploited for clicks, Keanu's response became a touchstone for ethical storytelling and platform responsibility. His quiet "no" to exploitation became a resounding "yes" to treating human suffering with reverence. Late-night television itself experienced a moment of collective introspection. Several hosts acknowledged the fine line between humor and harm, between challenging guests and cheapening their experiences. Some revised their approach to sensitive topics, recognizing that true connection requires respect, not just reaction. Jimmy Kimmel's subsequent open letter represents more than personal growth, it signals a potential shift in entertainment culture. His willingness to publicly admit error demonstrates how a boundary well placed can become a catalyst for positive change. The letter circulated widely among entertainment professionals, becoming required reading in several university courses on media ethics. The incident also recontextualized Keanu Reeves in the public consciousness. While always beloved for his kindness, this moment crystallized something deeper about his character. Fans began sharing stories of his quiet generosity, giving up subway seats, taking pay cuts so other actors could be hired, spending hours with children's hospital patients without publicity. His response to Kimmel wasn't an isolated incident but a consistent expression of his belief in human dignity. What makes Keanu's response particularly instructive is not just what he said, but how he said it. In a culture that often equates strength with volume, his composed delivery offered a masterclass in emotional regulation and strategic response. He didn't match Kimmel's attempt at humor with anger or sarcasm. He didn't escalate. Instead, he de-escalated while still holding firm. This level of self-possession doesn't emerge from nowhere, it's cultivated through experience, reflection, and often, great suffering. Keanu has spoken in rare interviews about practicing meditation and seeking philosophical understanding through Buddhism. These practices create the internal spaciousness that allows for response rather than reaction when boundaries are crossed. His measured tone conveyed not weakness but extraordinary self-control. The steady gaze, the deliberate pacing of his words, the absence of accusation in his voice, these elements combined to create a moment of authentic leadership. He didn't shame Kimmel, he invited him to do better. And in that invitation lay the profound difference between punitive boundary setting and transformative boundary setting. The phrase, "pain doesn't make someone weak, Jimmy. It makes them human. And sometimes it makes them stronger," reveals Keanu's hard-won wisdom about suffering. Rather than allowing his losses to become defining limitations, he has integrated them as sources of compassion and strength. This isn't toxic positivity or spiritual bypassing, it's the genuine alchemy that can occur when pain is honored rather than avoided. What makes this story resonate so deeply across cultural and geographical boundaries is its universality. We all know what it feels like to have our pain minimized, our experiences trivialized, our boundaries disrespected. And we all aspire to respond with the kind of centered clarity that Keanu demonstrated. In a world increasingly defined by division, where disagreement often devolves into dehumanization, Keanu's approach offers a radical alternative. He didn't demonize Jimmy Kimmel. He didn't storm off the set. He didn't launch a Twitter campaign against the show. Instead, he simply named the truth with dignity and stood firmly in his worth. This approach represents a form of power that doesn't require domination. It's the strength that comes from knowing your value so deeply that you don't need to prove it through aggression or spectacle. It's the confidence to prioritize integrity over approval. It's the wisdom to understand that true respect is earned not by what you tolerate but by what you refuse to accept. For many viewers, particularly those who have experienced trauma, Keanu's response was deeply validating. It said, "Your pain is not entertainment. Your experiences are not punchlines. Your boundaries deserve respect." In a culture that often pressures victims to lighten up or take a joke, his firm but measured response offered permission to say no to exploitation while still saying yes to connection. This moment on motivation for success reminds us that the transformation of the interview following this boundary setting demonstrates that dignity doesn't close doors, it opens them to more authentic exchange. When Kimmel shifted to asking real questions about Keanu's foundation, grief journey, and philosophy of kindness, the conversation deepened. The audience witnessed not just a celebrity interview but a genuine human connection forged in the crucible of mutual respect. This exchange offers profound lessons for anyone who communicates professionally. It illustrates the difference between engagement built on exploitation versus engagement built on respect. Jimmy Kimmel's initial approach, mining personal tragedy for entertainment, represents a common temptation in media culture. The search for viral moments often leads to crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. The immediate reward of audience reaction can obscure the deeper harm being done. Keanu's response models an alternative approach to compelling communication. By speaking truth with dignity, he created a moment more powerful than any scripted joke could achieve. The audience's response, that quiet, reverent applause, confirms that humans hunger for authenticity more than sensation. The evolution of the interview after the commercial break demonstrates how boundaries can elevate rather than terminate professional interactions. When Kimmel shifted to asking genuine questions, the conversation achieved a depth rarely seen in late-night television. Viewers didn't just learn about Keanu's projects, they glimpsed his philosophy, his values, his humanity. This transformation illustrates a profound truth: respect for human dignity doesn't diminish engagement, it deepens it. Real connection doesn't come from exposing vulnerabilities but from honoring them. True impact doesn't emerge from shock value but from truth spoken with conviction. Why does this story resonate so powerfully in our current moment? Perhaps because it speaks to a collective yearning for dignity in an age of dehumanization. We live in a time when human experiences, from trauma to triumph, are increasingly commodified as content. Pain becomes clickbait. Suffering becomes spectacle. Privacy becomes an outdated concept. Against this backdrop, Keanu's quiet insistence on dignity feels revolutionary. His refusal to allow his losses to be reduced to entertainment represents a countercultural stance that many hunger to embody in their own lives. His boundary setting offers a template for how we might reclaim our humanity in spaces that would reduce us to characters or caricatures. This story also touches on our collective grief literacy, or lack thereof. Western culture often struggles with how to acknowledge loss, how to speak of suffering, how to create space for pain without trying to fix, minimize, or exploit it. Keanu's response, "There are things in this world too sacred to turn into punchlines," offers a masterclass in grief literacy. It reminds us that some experiences must be approached with reverence rather than glibness. The wide resonance of this exchange suggests we stand at a potential inflection point in how we engage with human experience. As audiences increasingly reject exploitation and embrace authenticity, as viewers reward dignity over sensationalism, we glimpse the possibility of media that elevates rather than diminishes humanity. This story challenges each of us to examine how we respond when our boundaries are crossed. Do we react from hurt and escalate conflict? Do we remain silent and allow the violation? Or can we find that centered space from which to speak truth with dignity? Keanu's response emerges from what appears to be a deep well of self-knowledge and self-possession. These qualities aren't innate, they're cultivated through conscious practice. His composed delivery suggests years of internal work, processing grief without being defined by it, developing philosophical perspective, practicing presence amid provocation. For those seeking to develop similar quiet strength, several practices prove valuable: learning to feel fully without being overtaken by emotion, creating space between stimulus and response, identifying your non-negotiable lines before they're crossed. So responses come from conviction rather than reaction, recognizing that boundary violations often stem from unawareness rather than malice, speaking from integrity rather than intensity, choosing words that invite reflection rather than rejection. These skills become particularly crucial in an age of perpetual provocation. Social media algorithms reward outrage, political discourse celebrates aggression, and conflict generates more engagement than conciliation. Against this backdrop, the ability to respond rather than react becomes not just a personal skill but a social contribution. Long after the studio lights dim that night, the impact of this exchange continues to reverberate. For Keanu Reeves, it further cemented his reputation as a man of substance and character. For Jimmy Kimmel, it prompted reflection on the responsibilities that come with his platform. For millions who watched the clip, it offered both validation and aspiration: validation that pain deserves reverence, and aspiration to respond with similar dignity when boundaries are crossed. Perhaps the most significant legacy lies in the countless private moments inspired by this public exchange. The employee who calmly tells a manager, "That comment crossed a line." The friend who gently informs another, "My grief isn't material for jokes." The student who quietly informs a teacher, "My experience deserves more respect than that." Each instance represents Keanu's quiet strength rippling outward, empowering others to stand in their dignity. In a culture that often celebrates the loudest voice, the most extreme position, the most dramatic response, this story reminds us of a different kind of power. It's the power that comes not from dominating others but from knowing yourself. Not from raising your voice but from grounding your truth. Not from walking away but from standing firm. The next time you find yourself in a moment where someone crosses your line, whether in a boardroom, a living room, or an online space, remember this scene. Remember that you don't need to match disrespect with disrespect. You don't need to choose between doormat and detonator. You can simply stand in your truth, name the boundary with dignity, and create space for something better to emerge. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You just have to be clear on what matters, and unshakable when the world tries to laugh it off. The most remarkable aspect of this encounter was its aftermath. Several months later, a journalist asked Keanu about the Kimmel moment, as it had come to be known. Keanu's response was characteristic: it wasn't about winning or putting anyone in their place. It was about honoring what matters. When pressed about whether he had prepared that response, Keanu smiled slightly. No. When you know your boundaries clearly, you don't need a script. The truth just comes. That insight, that clarity of values leads to clarity of voice, has become something of a mantra for those who study communication and conflict resolution. One educator in Boston developed an entire curriculum around the exchange, teaching teenagers how to identify their non-negotiable boundaries and articulate them with dignity rather than defensiveness. A grief counselor in Chicago regularly shows the clip to support groups, highlighting how Keanu's response models a way to protect one's emotional well-being without shutting down or lashing out. What he did, she explains, was maintain connection while establishing boundaries. That's the holy grail of emotional intelligence. The real impact of this moment may never be fully measured. How many quiet conversations did it inspire? How many people watched it and found the courage to say, "That's not okay," the next time someone made light of their pain? How many hosts and comedians paused to consider the human cost of a potential joke? If this story moved you, wait till you see the moment Keanu stood up for a waitress who lost her job, just for doing the right thing. Tap here to watch that next. Has something like this ever happened in your life? Have you witnessed someone respond to disrespect with this kind of dignified strength? Don't keep it to yourself. If you've seen this quiet power in action, comment 1. If you've been the one to stand your ground with grace, Comment 2. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. And if this motivation for success story moved you, share it with someone who needs this reminder of the power of quiet dignity. You don't need a spotlight to shine. You don't need a microphone to be heard. Sometimes the most powerful voice in the room is the one that speaks just above a whisper, but with the full weight of truth behind it. As Keanu himself once said in a rare interview about his philosophy of life, the impact of a moment isn't measured by its volume, but by its depth. In 5 seconds of dignified boundary setting, he demonstrated a strength that hours of shouting could never achieve. Let this be our reminder today: true power rarely announces itself. It doesn't need to. Like Keanu in that studio, it simply shows up, stands its ground, and changes everything with a single sentence. Subscribe to Motivation for Success for more stories that reveal the strength behind stillness, and the power behind words unspoken.